The wind shoved hot desert dust against the gas station windows like a living thing, rattling the panes and painting everything beyond the glass in a hazy sepia blur. Inside, beneath the flicker of aging fluorescent lights, Rachel Monroe, 38, sat hunched at a corner table with a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Her shoulders were squared like someone braced for impact, but the circles under her eyes told the real story. Across from her, 16-year-old Haley Monroe worried the frayed edge of her sweatshirt sleeve, gaze flicking between the door, the security camera dome in the ceiling, and the tiny boy asleep on the bench seat between them. 4-year-old Liam had his head in Rachel's lap, thumb still halfway to his mouth, curls damp from the heat and from the nebulizer treatment he'd had in the free clinic that afternoon. The nebulizer mask and cheap plastic tubing poked out of a battered backpack under the table, next to a half-emptied bottle of store-brand asthma medicine. "Mom," Haley murmured, quietly enough that the bored clerk at the counter couldn't hear. "That guy's on his third lap." Rachel didn't look up right away. After months of living this way, she developed a sixth sense for when staring back made things worse. "Which one?" she asked, fingers absently smoothing Liam's hair. "Oil-stained cap, tank top, beer breath," Haley said. "He keeps walking the aisles and looking over here, like he's waiting for you to go to the bathroom and leave us alone." Rachel's jaw tightened. She'd seen the type more times than she cared to count. Men who smelled desperation like blood in the water, who thought a woman with no address and no protection was an invitation. She finally glanced up. The man in question lingered in front of the jerky display, pretending to read labels he was clearly not reading. When his eyes met Rachel's, he smiled, slow, assuming. Rachel turned back to Haley. 10 minutes, she said. "We finish this, then we move on, okay?" Haley frowned at the nearly empty coffee cup. "Move on to where?" "The Walmart lot kicked us out last night. The shelter's over capacity, remember?" Rachel swallowed the thin metallic taste of shame. "There's another church up by the freeway. Maybe they do overnight parking." "Maybe," Haley echoed, the word flat with the kind of weary skepticism no teenager should have had to master. A gust of wind hit the building so hard it shook. Liam's small body jerked in his sleep, cough catching in his throat before settling again. Rachel checked the time on her cracked phone screen. Past midnight. They'd been like this for 8 months now, ever since the medical bills and job loss and eviction had piled together into an avalanche. 8 months of sleeping in a car until the car got repossessed. 8 months of shelters that wouldn't take families with teenage kids of the wrong gender, of couches that ran out and friends whose patience and resources ran thin. 8 months of feeling the world closing in, one locked door at a time. The gas station door beeped as someone walked in, letting in a slap of oven-hot air and grit. Rachel didn't look up until she heard the new voice. A woman's voice, older, tinted with a southwestern drawl that made certain syllables sag pleasantly in the middle. "Rachel?" For a second, Rachel thought she'd imagined it. Hardly anyone used her first name anymore. At clinic, she was next. At the shelter, client. To some cops, ma'am, and to others, not even that. She turned. Near the door stood a woman in her late 60s. Compact and sturdy, with sun-leathered skin and gray hair braided down her back under a straw hat. The woman's eyes were a sharp, startling blue, and they were studying Rachel's face like they were flipping through an old photo album. "I didn't want to bother you if I was wrong," the woman said. "But Lord, you're the spitting image of your mama. County's been trying to track down next of kin since. Letters, notices, even a public posting in the newspaper. But your mama changed addresses like other folks changed socks once she left, and no one ever found you." Rachel's fingers tightened on the sticky tabletop. I didn't know any of that, I figured." Maya reached into her canvas bag and pulled out a folded, creased envelope. "He left this with me. Swore up and down I'd run into you eventually. I told him that's not how big states and long years work, but he just smiled and said the desert has a way of bringing folks back home." Haley's brow shot up. "That's not creepy at all." The waitress arrived with water and menus, breaking the moment. Liam pointed eagerly at the picture of pancakes on the kid's menu. "You can get pancakes, buddy," Rachel murmured, kissing his hair. "Go slow, though, okay?" When Denise left, Rachel stared at the envelope in Maya's weathered hand. On the front, in shaky block letters, was written, For Rachel, when the world runs out of road, her throat closed. She recognized the handwriting, even after almost 30 years. Go on, Maya said softly. Rachel slid her finger under the seal and opened it. Inside was a single page, yellowed with age and covered in careful script. My Rachel girl, if you're reading this, it means two things. First, I'm gone. Second, life has backed you into a corner. I prayed it would never come to that. But if it did, I wanted to make sure you had something I never had. A way to fight back. There's a piece of land out at Arroyo Flats that still has our name on the deed. The county calls it Parcel 17B. We called it home. The house has gone to dust by now, I'd guess. But under it there's an old installation that the government boys put in during the war. An underground place. They sealed it up tight in 1947 and told us never to go near it. I signed papers I shouldn't have. Kept quiet when I shouldn't have. And I spent the rest of my life regretting it. Inside that sealed place is the truth about what was done to people like us and to this land. Names, dates, orders, proof. The kind of proof that makes powerful men nervous. I couldn't open it back then without risking you and your mama. But you, if the world's got you up against the wall anyway, that truth might be the only real thing you can use. Maya knows where the place is. She's stubborn and loud, but she's good. If you're hearing this, she's the one who found you. If you decide to go back to Arroyo Flats, be careful who you trust. The company that ran those wartime projects changed its name more times than I've changed my hat, but the families behind it stayed the same. They'll pay any price to keep what's buried there from seeing daylight. Whatever you choose, know this: nothing that happened was your fault. You deserve better than the world gave you. Love, Granddad Calvin. Rachel's hand shook by the time she reached the signature. Is this real? Haley asked, voice low. Like, for real, for real? We have land. Maya nodded. Your granddad held on to that deed till the day he died. They tried to buy him out more than once. He refused. Said he owed somebody more than he owed himself. We can't even afford a motel room, Rachel whispered. And you're telling me I own desert? Desert with a big, ugly secret underneath it, Maya said. County's got it down as condemned, but condemned and owned are two different things. If you go to the courthouse in Santa Rosa, sign the right papers as his next of kin, that land's yours officially. For the moment, anyway. For the moment, Haley chimed in. Maya's mouth flattened. There's a corporation been sniffing around out there for years now. Sonoran Dynamics Energy. They set up solar farms and research facilities and God knows what else. They're real interested in anything near the old Arroyo installations. They tried to get your granddad on environmental remediation grounds. That's lawyer talk for, we'll pretend we're cleaning it for you while we take what we want. He told them to take a long walk off a short butt. Liam, catching only pieces of the grown-up words, yawned and asked, Do they have pancakes at the desert? Haley huffed a laugh despite herself. Pretty sure that's a no, little dude. Rachel folded the letter carefully, as if it might crumble. Why are you doing this? She asked Maya. You owe me nothing. You could have thrown this away years ago. Your granddad saved my brother's life once, Maya said simply. In 1944, when the contractors came through and started scooping up every brown-skinned boy they could find for war work. Calvin hid my brother in his root cellar for 3 nights. Got him on a bus to California with a fake name. So if Calvin asked me to hold a letter for his granddaughter, I held it. That's how debts work where I come from. Rachel looked at her children, at the cracked red vinyl of the booth, at the thin envelope that suddenly seemed to hum with potential in her hand. What if it's nothing, she said. What if we go back there and it's just a bunch of dusty junk and an empty hole? Then you're in no worse shape than you were this morning, Maya said. But if it's not nothing, if it's what Calvin thought it was, she shook her head, then you got more power than you think. Haley leaned in, eyes bright despite her wariness. Mom, at least we'd have somewhere to go. Even if it's just a piece of dirt, better than getting chased out of every parking lot in Arizona. Like it or not, she was right. Rachel's world had shrunk down to a handful of unsafe options. Here suddenly was a door. It might open into a nightmare, but it was a door. Okay, Rachel said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. We'll go, we'll see what's there. Maya nodded as if she'd already known the answer. Eat first, she said briskly. Then we'll figure out the courthouse. 2 days later, the Monroe family's entire worldly belongings rattled in the back of Maya's truck as they drove east. Out of Arizona and into New Mexico, the interstate unspooled in a wavering ribbon, framed by endless miles of scrub mesquite and the occasional rusted-out billboard promising miracles that never arrived. Liam pressed his face to the window, leaving small, ghostly smudges on the glass. "Is that ours?" he asked every 20 minutes, pointing at cows, hills, random radio towers. "Not yet," Haley would say. "You'll know when we see it. Will it have a playground?" Probably not." "Wi-Fi? Definitely not." Rachel listened to them with a mix of amusement and fear. She hadn't thought about Arroyo Flats in years. Now the images resurfaced in flickers. Her mother's tired smile. A trailer so old you could see daylight through some of the seams, the deep electric silence of nights when the stars felt close enough to grab. And underneath it all, a memory she'd never fully understood of men in suits, talking low and urgent with Granddad, while her mother paced in the kitchen, chain-smoking and cursing under her breath in 2 languages. Maya drove with one hand on the wheel and the other occasionally jabbing at the radio presets, hunting for a station that didn't sound like static and heartbreak. "They'll want proof you're you," she told Rachel as they approached Santa Rosa. "Birth certificate, old mail, something." "I've got my Ohio ID and Liam's hospital records," Rachel said. "I had to fight like hell to keep those from getting lost in our last move." "It'll do," Maya said. "County clerks in places like this see plenty of folks with holes in their paperwork. Long as the pieces mostly line up and there's not a line of cousins fighting you, they'll file what needs filing." The courthouse in Santa Rosa was a square, sun-blasted building with a fading mural of local heroes on one wall. Inside, it smelled like dust and old toner. The clerk behind the counter, a man pushing 50, with a turquoise bolo tie, and the patience of someone who dealt with every variety of bureaucratic nonsense, squinted at the letter, at Rachel's ID. At the thick rubber-banded file he eventually fished out of a back room. "Monroe, Monroe, Calvin J. Monroe," he muttered. "Deceased. No recorded spouse at time of death. Next of kin, 1 daughter, whereabouts unknown. 1 granddaughter, name unknown." He looked up. "Guess we can fill that in." It took 2 hours of forms, a supervisor's signature, and a brief awkward moment when Liam melted down in the waiting area because his inhaler made his chest feel funny. But by noon, Rachel held a crisp official sheet of paper that said, in formal legalese, that parcel 17B at Arroyo Flats was hers. "Congratulations," the clerk said. "You now officially own a piece of the middle of nowhere." She owned the middle of nowhere long before this, Haley muttered. Now she just has paperwork. As they stepped out into the white glare of midday, a sleek black SUV rolled up to the curb. The contrast between it and Maya's dusty truck was like a before and after ad for success. A man in his early 50s stepped out. He wore a tailored navy suit that had never met a day of manual labor, sunglasses that probably cost more than everything Rachel owned, and a smile so precise it looked calibrated. "Ms. Monroe," he called, closing the SUV door with a soft, expensive thump. Rachel slowed, instinctively gathering Liam closer. Haley moved to her other side, shoulders hitching up defensively. "Yes," Rachel said. The man extended a hand. "Cole Harlow, Regional Liaison for Sonoran Dynamics Energy. First, let me say how sorry I am for your loss." Calvin was, well, he was something of a legend around here. His handshake was firm and practiced. Rachel gave him the shortest version she could get away with before retrieving her hand. "He died a long time ago. Time doesn't diminish influence," Cole said smoothly. His attention flicked to Maya. "Ms. Ortiz, good to see you again." "Can't say I feel the same, Cole," Maya replied, crossing her arms. Cole chuckled like she'd made a charming joke. "I heard the county finally located next of kin," he continued. "Small towns, you know how fast news travels." Rachel's stomach tightened. He'd known before they'd even stepped fully into the sun. "Look, I won't take much of your time," Cole said, slipping into what was clearly a well-rehearsed pitch. "Sonoran Dynamics has been investing heavily in green energy infrastructure in this region. We've cleaned up hazardous waste, remediate contaminated sites, places like Arroyo Flats, which, as I'm sure they told you in there," he nodded toward the courthouse, "has a complex environmental history. Rachel said nothing. We've been trying to consolidate parcels around some of the old installations, Cole went on. Make sure everything's properly monitored. And of course, we always aim to compensate landowners fairly, especially local families like yours. Not local anymore, Haley muttered. Cole pretended not to hear. The parcel you've inherited is frankly more liability than asset as it stands. Restricted structures, possible underground contaminants. You can't build on it, you can't live there not legally. It just sits, costing you taxes and giving you headaches. We don't pay taxes on something we didn't know we had, Rachel said. Ah, but now you do, Cole replied. And so does the county. He slipped a slim folder from under his arm and opened it, revealing a neatly printed offer sheet. I'm authorized to extend a cash offer today, he said. Clean, simple. Enough for you to get a fresh start anywhere you like. Down payment on a house, reliable transportation, medical coverage for your little guy there. We can even structure it with a small trust for your daughter's education. He slid the paper toward her. The number at the bottom made Rachel's vision blur for a moment. She thought of hospital waiting rooms, of counting out pills, of watching Liam's tiny chest heave and praying the nebulizer held out one more night. She thought of Haley pretending she didn't care about missing school, then staring a little too long at kids their age through cafeteria windows. She also thought of Granddad Calvin's letter, of words like names and proof, and men who'd pay any price. What's under there? She asked. Under the old installation. Cole smiled, just a fraction too wide. Old equipment, outmoded technology, some things best left to professionals to handle safely. It's been sealed for 70+ years for a reason. Sealed by who? Haley cut in. And why? Cole's eyes flicked to her briefly, reassessing. By the federal government, in coordination with our legacy partners, following post-war decommissioning protocols. Frankly, the specifics are ancient history. What matters now is making sure it doesn't pose a risk to surrounding communities. Interesting how it's suddenly such a big risk the minute we sign the deed, Maya said dryly. Cole's facade didn't crack, but something hard glinted behind his sunglasses. We've been interested in that site for years, he said. Your grandfather was resistant. Stubborn pride is a luxury most families can't afford, Miss Monroe. I'd hate for you to repeat his mistakes. Rachel folded the offer sheet carefully, without looking at the total again. I just found out I inherited a patch of desert, she said. You show up within an hour with a number that looks like a lottery ticket. Forgive me if that feels less like concern and more like pressure. Of course, Cole said smoothly. You're shocked, overwhelmed. That's precisely why I'd advise against rushing into anything risky. If you try to enter any restricted structures without proper authorization and something happens, to you, to your children, well, no amount of money from any settlement will bring them back. The air between them seemed to thin. Was that a threat? Haley asked, incredulous. A warning, Cole said. All pleasant edges again. We're on the same side here, Ms. Monroe. We both want what's best for your family. Take 48 hours. Think it over. I'll be at the Desert Star Lodge outside town. You can call me anytime. He handed her a business card with a gleaming Sonoran Dynamics logo embossed at the top. Then he slid into the SUV and pulled away, tires whispering on hot asphalt. Maya watched him go, eyes narrowed. Same family, different name, she muttered. What do you mean? Rachel asked. Cole Harlow's granddaddy was Edgar Harlow, Maya said. Man who rode in here in '43, talking about opportunity and patriotism, waving federal contracts in our faces. My father used to spit on the ground every time he drove by. Said Edgar was the kind of man who could make poison sound like medicine. So this is... What? Haley said. Like a generational scam? Maya shrugged one shoulder. Families around here pass down land and recipes. Their families pass down corporations and legal loopholes. Rachel looked at the offer again, at the neat lines of text promising security in exchange for silence. Her thumb brushed the edge of Granddad's letter in her pocket. What do you want to do? Maya asked softly. Rachel stared out at the road, stretching toward a horizon that shimmered in the heat. For months, every choice she'd made had been between bad and worse. Now, for the first time, she had the option to walk toward something unknown but hers. I want to see it, she said. I want to see what he died protecting. Haley let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Then let's go," she said. The road to Arroyo Flats was more suggestion than infrastructure. A cracked, fading line of asphalt that eventually surrendered to dirt and gravel, then to tire tracks winding between low sagebrush and scattered yucca. Maya's truck groaned but persisted, dust blooming behind them in a long golden plume. The land here was vast and deceptively empty, all big sky and low scrub with the distant blue smudge of mountains on the horizon. "There," Maya said, pointing. At first, Rachel saw nothing but more desert. Then the shape came into focus. A cluster of low, crumbling concrete foundations, the skeletons of long-gone trailers, and a leaning windmill that still creaked lazily in the hot breeze. Home, or what was left of it. Maya parked near what had once been a driveway. Rachel stepped out and was instantly hit by a wave of remembered smells. Dust, sun-baked plywood, the faint tang of motor oil. Haley squinted against the brightness. "Wow," she said. "Pinterest really lied about off-grid desert living." Liam held Rachel's hand. Other hand clamped around his inhaler like a talisman. "Is this our house?" he asked. "It was," Rachel said. "A long time ago, they picked their way through the ruin." Here was the ghost outline of the trailer Rachel had slept in. There, the slab that had held Granddad's workshop. Rusted tools still lay scattered, half buried in sand, like he'd just stepped out for a smoke and never come back. "The bunker's not here," Maya said, scanning the ground. "It's out back, where the arroyo bends." They followed her past the old windmill, over a cracked stretch of dry earth, to where the land dropped off into a shallow wash carved by decades of flash floods. Built into the side of the arroyo was a concrete doorway, half obscured by tumbleweeds and silt. A set of rusted metal doors sealed the entrance, each leaf emblazoned with a faded stencil. U.S. Property Authorized Personnel, only sealed 1947 below the blunt official text. Someone, Granddad, Rachel knew instinctively, had scratched into the concrete with something sharp. When the truth matters more than fear, Haley whistled under her breath. He really had a way with signage. Rachel's heart pounded in her throat. The metal doors were held shut by a heavy chain, and an ancient padlock so corroded it looked like part of the door itself. "They really expected that thing to hold for 70 years, Haley said. "It's not the lock that kept folks out," Maya replied. "It was the stories. Radiation, nerve agents, subterranean gas. They said stepping foot in there could make your kids come out with 3 heads. Good way to keep poor folks from asking how their land got carved up." Rachel ran her fingers over the etched words. The concrete was warm under her touch. "What if they were right?" she asked quietly. "What if going in there actually is dangerous, for them?" She nodded toward the kids. Maya considered. "You all don't step 1 foot inside until I know it's not going to fry anybody," she said. "But I don't trust Harlow's idea of danger, any more than I trust his idea of generous." She trudged back to the truck and returned with a battered toolbox and a canvas sack filled with gear that looked like it had been collected over 4 decades of protests and salvage jobs. Masks, gloves, a handheld radiation meter that beeped faintly when tapped. Rolls of plastic sheeting. "You thought we might end up here," Rachel realized. Maya shrugged. "I've been waiting on this day since Calvin gave me that letter. Didn't know if it had come. Figured if it did, I'd better be ready." She tested the chain, then braced herself and brought a crowbar down hard on the padlock. The sound cracked across the empty wash like a gunshot. Liam flinched. 3 blows later, the lock gave way, crumbling in a shower of rust. Rachel's palms were sweating. Haley pulled out her phone automatically, thumb hovering over the camera icon. "Don't post anything," Rachel said quickly. "Not yet. Just record." Haley nodded. "Evidence, not clout." "Got it." Maya looped the chain aside and pried one of the doors open just enough to let a breath of stale, cold air escape. It smelled like metal and old paper and something else Rachel couldn't name. A tang of time and secrecy. Maya slipped on a mask and gloves, clipped the little meter to her belt, and vanished into the darkness with a flashlight. The minutes stretched. Rachel kept one hand on Liam's shoulder, the other wrapped so tightly around Granddad's letter it crinkled. "What if she doesn't come back?" Liam whispered. "She will," Haley said, sounding more confident than Rachel felt. "Maya's like indestructible. She probably chews nails for breakfast. 5 minutes. 7. The sun beat down, unforgiving. Then light flared inside. and Maya's voice called, slightly muffled, "Hey, you might want to see this." Rachel hesitated, then pulled down 2 of the extra masks from Maya's bag. "You stay right here with Liam," she told Haley. "If I scream, you run to the truck and hit the horn until the sky falls." "That's reassuring," Haley muttered, but she helped Liam with a mask anyway. Inside, Rachel's eyes adjusted slowly. The bunker was bigger than she'd expected, a long rectangular room lit by Maya's flashlight and the weak beam filtering in from the door. Rows of metal shelving lined the walls, stacked with metal boxes and yellowing binders. An old switchboard covered one wall, its bakelite knobs and cloth-wrapped wires frozen mid-task. "There's no smell of chemicals," Maya said. "Meter's not picking up anything scary." Looks like this was more brains than bombs. Rachel stepped closer to one of the shelves. A file box sat there, labeled in neat typewriter text. "Arroyo Operations, Contractor Correspondence, 1943-1947. She opened it. Inside were letters on brittle paper, some with government letterheads, others on stationery from companies she vaguely recognized from history class. Southwest Rail and Supply, Continental Munitions, Harlow and Pierce Industrial Partners. The words on the first letter she picked up made her mouth go dry. "Per our understanding, all excess labor units will be redirected to off-books facilities for duration of conflict. No official records will reflect their involvement. Families are to be informed that said individuals have relocated voluntarily in pursuit of wartime employment. Excess labor units," Rachel read aloud. "That's people. They're talking about people." Maya's flashlight beam landed on another cabinet, this one with a steel door and a heavy combination lock. It hung open, the lock dangling uselessly. Oh. Inside lay stacks of bound reports, old microfilm reels, and, shockingly, a small tape recorder that looked like it belonged in a 1970s spy movie. "What the hell is this?" Maya murmured. Rachel picked up one of the reports. The cover page bore a neat stamp. "Project Dry Current, Field Incidents and Casualty Logs." Confidential. Her fingers shook as she flipped through. Tables of dates, locations, numbers. Columns labeled injury, fatality, containment action. Attached memos discussing securing the perimeter, minimizing local unrest, and maintaining plausible deniability. She found stapled near the back a roster of names under the heading Non-Citizen Labor Units. Arroyo Flats region. Mexican surnames, Pueblo names, Navajo names, a scattering of last names like Ortiz and Hill and Beckett. Next to more than half of them, a terse notation, "No further contact." Maya's flashlight trembled. "That's my uncle's name," she whispered, pointing. "Luis Ortiz. They told my mama he ran off to Albuquerque to find work. She waited for a postcard till the day she died." Rachel couldn't speak. Her chest felt tight, crowded with voices from a past that had never been allowed to surface. On a small metal desk in the corner sat a box with Monroe, C.J. stamped on the lid. Rachel opened it. Inside were notebooks in Granddad's distinctive, blocky handwriting. On the first page of one, dated March 1944, he'd written, "This is for whoever finds it when the lies finally crack. I am part of this machine, and I hate myself for it." They tell me it's for the war effort. The pages that followed were a meticulous account of what he'd witnessed. Shipments of chemicals mislabeled as fertilizer, trainloads of men delivered under armed guard, accidental leaks that sickened entire migrant camps. He'd copied internal memos word for word, sketched maps of hidden waste pits and unmarked grave sites in the scrub. By the time Rachel looked up, her eyes burned with more than dust. Granddad was running a one-man truth commission under their noses, she said hoarsely. He couldn't stop it, but he made sure it got written down. "Why hide it?" Maya asked. "If he'd gotten this out back then, they'd have called him a traitor," Rachel said, "or made him disappear. Or both." They explored deeper. Another room held metal drums stamped with chemical names Rachel recognized from modern environmental disasters. Most had been emptied and left to rust. Some were still sealed, but their surfaces were pitted and corroded. "Okay, this part is dangerous," Maya conceded. "We keep the kids out, keep the door open, don't touch anything leaking. But those documents in the front room, that's the real bomb." Rachel gathered a stack of the most damning files. Labor rosters, contract letters, casualty reports linking Harlow's company directly to illegal dumping and forced labor. She hesitated at the door, looking back one last time at the bunker's gloom. Take pictures of everything you don't grab, Maya said. Paper burns, servers crash. But the more copies exist, the harder it is to erase. They spent the next 2 hours in a frenzy of documentation. Haley, properly masked and sternly instructed to stay near the entrance, snapped photo after photo on her phone, backing them up to every free cloud service she could find. Rachel did the same on Maya's flip phone, manually emailing images to an address Maya dictated from memory. Friend of mine in Albuquerque, Maya said, runs a little community radio station that likes pissing off the wrong people. By the time they emerged fully into the sunlight, Rachel's head spun. She felt like someone who'd stumbled on a minefield made of paper. Now what? Haley asked. We can't just tweet, hey, my granddad found a corporate war crime bunker, lol. They'd bury us in lawsuits before the first like rolled in. They'll come back, Rachel said, staring out over the scrub. Harlow, his people, they can't afford not to. Not if they even suspect what we found. So we don't wait for them here, Maya said. We go find someone who knows how to aim this kind of thing. They didn't have to look far. In the small town abutting Arroyo Flats, tucked between a payday loan storefront and a shuttered movie theater, stood a little building with a peeling sign that read, Rio Norte Free Clinic and Community Resource Center. Inside, a harried nurse practitioner treated rashes and aches while a volunteer at a folding table helped people fill out forms for food assistance. On the back wall, a bulletin board held flyers in English and Spanish about everything from tutoring to tenants' rights. It was there they met Dr. Lena Park, a Korean-American physician in her 40s, with a stethoscope around her neck and activist buttons on her lab coat pocket. She listened to Liam's lungs first, because she insisted on that, then to Rachel's halting explanation of the bunker. When Rachel pulled out the roster with Luis Ortiz's name, Lena's eyebrows climbed. When she saw the Harlow stamped contracts, they disappeared entirely under her bangs. You're saying you found a fully preserved wartime operations archive under your property, Lena said slowly. Linked directly to Sonoran Dynamics parent companies. That's what it looks like, Rachel said. Is that a thing people can use legally? If it's as comprehensive as you're describing, it's not just a thing, it's a nuke, Lena said. But nukes can blow back on whoever drops them. You can't just walk into a courthouse and slap this on the desk. Sonoran has lawyers in every direction. They'll claim it's forged, it's stolen, it's protected by classified status, even if its classification technically expired decades ago. And in the meantime, they'll try to make your life hell. Can they take my kids? Rachel asked, the words emerging before she could stop them. Lena's face softened. They can try to weaponize any vulnerability, she said. Housing instability, Liam's medical needs, past run-ins with the system. That's why you need someone who knows how to play their game. She rummaged through a drawer and pulled out a business card with a worn logo. Elena Vargas, J.D., Lena read aloud. Environmental and civil rights attorney. She used to live in D.C. Did time in the belly of the beast. Came back out here a few years ago after burning out on federal work. I send her all my water contamination and illegal dumping nightmares. Will she even take something this big? Haley asked. If she doesn't, I will personally march this file to every reporter I know, Lena said. But Elena's smart. She knows a fulcrum when she sees one. Elena Vargas met them that evening in the clinic's back room, still in her jogging clothes, hair twisted into a knot. She looked like she hadn't slept much in years, and like she dared the world to try her. They spread the copies on the table. Elena read in silence for 20 minutes, flipping between documents, her finger tracing from header to header. This is staggering, she finally said. They kept everything. Rosters, internal memos admitting knowledge of safety violations, excess labor units. Her lip curled around the phrase. They even documented the cover-up. Idiots. Why would they keep it? Haley asked. If you're doing evil stuff, don't you, not write it down? Because they thought they were untouchable, Elena said. Because back then, every man in those rooms thought history was going to vindicate them. That they were patriots doing what needed to be done. And patriots love paperwork. Can we use it? Rachel pressed. Not in theory, for real. Before Harlow finds a way to make us disappear. Elena tapped the stack thoughtfully. We can't drop this all at once, she said. We need to secure the originals, create multiple chains of custody, get independent verification. We also need to control the narrative from the start. If this leaks in dribs and drabs, Sonoran will spin it as conspiracy theory nonsense. So, what, we just sit on it, Haley said. Let them keep doing whatever they're doing out there. No, Elena said. We go on the offensive. Quietly at first. We file an injunction to prevent any remediation work or demolition at Arroyo Flats on the basis of potential historical and environmental significance. That freezes the site legally, at least for a bit. We send anonymized excerpts of these documents to a couple of journalists I trust. Not the big national outlets yet. They're too easily leaned on. Local and regional reporters with a record of not backing down. And me? Rachel asked. What do I do? You decide how loud you want to be, Elena said gently. You're the heir, you have standing. But that also puts a target on your back. We can file some things with you as Jane Doe initially, but if this snowballs, your name will get out. Harlow will frame you as an ungrateful vagrant trying to shake down a benevolent company. Rachel thought of Cole's immaculate suit, his suburban campaign ad smile. She imagined him on television, talking about misunderstandings and regrettable historical practices that do not reflect our current values. She thought of Granddad, alone at his kitchen table by lamplight, copying memos while the world above pretended not to know. If we don't do this, she said slowly, then all those names in that roster just stay ghosts. And Sonoran keeps making money off a graveyard. Elena held her gaze. Yes. Rachel's fear and fury collided, sparking something heavier. It settled in her chest like a new kind of gravity. Then we do it, she said. If they're going to come for us anyway, I'd rather it be for telling the truth than for taking hush money. Haley exhaled sharply, eyes shining. For once, I'm glad you're stubborn, she said. The next 48 hours blurred. Elena and Lena helped Rachel and the kids move into a small, spare room at the back of the clinic for the time being. 4 walls, 2 cots, a mini fridge, and a bathroom down the hall. To Rachel, it felt like a palace. They scanned every document they could, saved them to encrypted drives, printed hard copies to store in multiple locations. Elena's office in town. Lena's locked cabinet at the clinic, Maya's house in the next county over. They mailed a sealed packet to an old university friend of Elena's, who now taught environmental law, and had a safe deposit box far from Sonoran's usual orbit. Meanwhile, Elena drafted a flurry of filings, emergency injunctions, notice of intent to sue, requests under the Freedom of Information Act for any declassified material related to Project Dry Current and Arroyo operations. Rachel signed where she was told, the pen feeling heavier with each signature. Haley, watching, joked that her mom's autograph was going to be worth something someday. You better hope it's not worth something as an exhibit in a cautionary tale, Elena muttered, half teasing. Maya acted as field marshal, driving out to Arroyo Flats daily to keep watch. On the 3rd day, she called Elena from the top of the ridge, voice tight. They're here, she said. 2 trucks with Sonoran logos, plus a black SUV that looks suspiciously Harlow-ish. They're setting up heaters and work lights, like they're getting ready for a dig. Elena cursed softly. The injunction hasn't landed on the right desk yet, she said. They're trying to get in under the wire. Rachel's pulse hammered. Can they just dig up my land? If they claim it's an emergency remediation of a hazardous site, they'll try, Elena said. But they don't know exactly what you've already moved. That's your leverage. That evening, Cole Harlow appeared at the clinic. He didn't bother with an appointment. He just walked in like he owned the place, trailed by 2 security types in polo shirts tied across their shoulders. Lena intercepted him in the waiting room. We're a medical facility, not a boardroom, she said coolly. If you want to get your blood pressure checked from all this stress, grab a number like everyone else. I'm here to see Miss Monroe, Cole said. This is urgent? She's resting, Lena replied. You can talk to her attorney. Elena stepped out of the hallway, arms folded, eyes sharp. You seem confused about where and how this conversation is going to happen, she said. If you have something to say, we can schedule a deposition like civilized litigants. Cole ignored her, focusing on Rachel, who had appeared just behind Elena, drawn by the raised voices. "Rachel," he said, dropping the pretense of last names, "you're making a serious mistake." "You mean not taking your check?" Rachel asked. "I mean allowing yourself to be used as a pawn in someone else's crusade," Cole replied. "These lawyers, these so-called advocates, they're here for the spectacle. They'll move on to the next cause either way. You won't. You'll still be here with 2 kids and no resources, while your name is dragged through every mud pit they can find." "Is that a promise?" Haley said dryly from the doorway of their little room. Cole's gaze flicked to her. "You're a bright girl," he said. "Think about your future. College. Stability. Healthcare. Does any of that come from picking a doomed fight over something that happened before your grandparents were even born?" "My granddad was born then," Haley shot back, "and her granddad watched it happen." She nodded at Rachel. "Last I checked, families don't have an expiration date on justice." Elena stepped fully between them. "Mr. Harlow, unless you're here to serve documented offers through the appropriate channels, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You are currently in violation of at least 3 state regulations by bringing corporate security onto clinic property without permission." "We're just having a conversation," Cole said lightly. "No need to be dramatic." "Security," Lena called, without raising her voice much. 2 volunteers from the next room over, one a former Marine, the other a retired gym teacher, appeared in the doorway, arms folded. Cole's smile thinned. "This isn't over, Ms. Monroe," he said quietly. "You're up against something much bigger than you can imagine." Rachel met his gaze, surprised to realize that under the fear something like calm had settled in her. "Good," she said. "Maybe for once, something bigger than me can take a hit instead." Cole stared a beat longer, then turned and walked out, his entourage flanking him like shadow. The first news story broke a week later. Not on a national network, not in a glossy magazine, but on a scrappy independent site run out of Albuquerque. Borderline truth. The headline read, "Leaked documents tie Sonoran Dynamics predecessors to wartime forced labor camp in New Mexico desert." The article was long, dense, and blistering. It quoted labor rosters, casualty reports, and internal memos, redacted only enough to protect some names and the exact location of certain sites, at least for now. It quoted a descendant of a frontline contractor who spoke anonymously about a legacy of silence finally cracking. Within days, a regional TV station picked it up, then a bigger paper in Denver. Then, finally, a national outlet looking for a new angle on corporate greenwashing. Sonoran Dynamics issued a statement expressing concern over historical documents that may or may not accurately reflect the practices of companies that no longer exist. They promised an internal review. They emphasized their commitment to sustainability and community partnership. Elena rolled her eyes so hard she nearly strained something. Translation: "We're sorry you saw that, not that we did it." But the story had pierced their armor. Former employees started emailing the reporters. People whose grandparents had disappeared near Arroyo Flats called the clinic, voices shaking, asking if there were names. In a small meeting room at the clinic, Rachel, Elena, and Lena read those names together. They made lists, cross-referenced rosters, and, as gently as possible, confirmed what families had waited 70 years to know. "It's not closure," an old woman named Mrs. Beckett said through tears when she came to the clinic with her grandson. "But at least now I know my daddy didn't just leave. They took him." Rachel hugged her, feeling the shared weight of generations of not knowing settle into something like collective purpose. Sonoran, rattled, tried a new tactic. They offered to fund a memorial, a scholarship fund for descendants of those affected by historical injustices. They floated the idea of a partnership with local advocacy groups. "We want to move forward together," Cole said on a televised segment, standing in front of an array of gleaming solar panels, "looking toward a cleaner, more equitable future while honoring the past." "Funny how honoring the past never seems to involve losing any money," Maya scoffed at the TV. Elena advised caution. "They're hoping you'll settle privately," she told Rachel. "They might even sweeten the pot just for you. That way they can claim they made it right and silence the most direct heir to the site." Sure enough, a week later, an envelope arrived by certified mail, addressed to Rachel, Inside was an offer that made Cole's courthouse number look modest, and a non-disclosure agreement the size of a novella. "If you sign this," Elena said, skimming it, "you can never publicly discuss Arroyo Flats again. Not the bunker, not the documents, not your grandfather's role. You accept that Sonoran is under no legal obligation to admit wrongdoing. In exchange, they give you money and a carefully worded regret statement." Rachel read the figure 3 times. She imagined paying off Liam's medical debt, putting down first and last month's rent on an actual apartment, buying Haley a laptop that wasn't held together with tape. "What happens if I say no?" she asked. "Then we keep going," Elena said. "We push for a full federal investigation. We lobby for designation of Arroyo Flats as a historical and environmental disaster site which would bar private development. We sue Sonoran in civil court on behalf of affected families and you, as the landowner whose property was used without consent. It will be long. It will be ugly. They will try to drag your name through the mud. There are no guarantees. And if I say yes, you and your kids get financial stability," Elena said bluntly, "and Sonoran gets to write the ending." In the end, the choice came down to a conversation in the quiet of the clinic's little room. Late at night, after Liam finally stopped coughing himself toward exhaustion, Haley sat cross-legged on her cot, the offer letter between them. "We could be safe," she said. "For the first time in, like ever." "Safash," Rachel said. "Safe from being broke. Not safe from knowing we helped them bury this." "You always told me to think about Liam first," Haley said. "About what he needs?" "I am," Rachel said. "That's why this is so hard." Haley was quiet a moment. "What if we didn't have to pick just one kid to think about?" she finally said. "What if? This is going to sound cheesy, but what if Liam isn't the only kid we're responsible for? What about all the kids whose water's messed up because of this? Or whose grandparents never came home?" Rachel looked at her daughter, at the fierce, tired determination in her eyes. It struck her that Haley had grown up on the back end of every bad decision Rachel had made trying to survive. Now, maybe they had a chance to make a different kind of choice. Not between good and bad, but between 2 versions of too expensive. "What do you want me to do?" Rachel asked. Haley smiled crookedly. "You're the mom," she said. "But if it were me, I'd fight. Not because I like being broke, but because if we let them buy us off, we're telling every company like that all they ever have to do is wait until someone's desperate enough." The next morning, Rachel handed the unsigned offer back to Elena. "Let's keep going," she said. It took another 6 months for the case to become impossible to ignore. The FOIA requests came back with heavily redacted packets that still, tellingly, confirmed the existence of Project Dry Current and its use of non-citizen labor sources. More media outlets dug in. One national documentary series did a segment on the bunker in the desert, blurring the exact location, but interviewing families, experts, and, anonymously, a former Sonoran engineer who claimed current operations still used legacy disposal methods off the books. Under pressure, the state attorney general's office announced a preliminary investigation. A junior staffer who'd grown up near Arroyo Flats, and whose grandfather's name appeared in one of the rosters, quietly made sure Elena's filings landed on the right desks. Sonoran fought back with every tool they had. Countersuits alleging trespass and theft of proprietary information, smear campaigns painting Rachel as a transient opportunist exploited by radical activists, op-eds about the danger of judging historical actors by modern standards. Through it all, Rachel kept showing up, to depositions, to community meetings in church basements, to late-night strategy sessions at Elena's cluttered office, where takeout containers accumulated faster than case notes. There were days she wanted to quit, when another threatening letter from Sonoran's lawyers left her shaking, when Liam had a bad asthma night, and she found herself wondering if she'd doomed her kids to instability out of pride. On those days, she'd take Granddad's notebook out of the safe at Elena's office, flip to the entry where he'd written, in a rare moment of rawness, "If anyone ever asks why I didn't speak up sooner, tell them I was a coward. Then tell them I finally got sick enough of the taste of my own fear to spit it out." She'd read that line over until it felt less like condemnation and more like invitation. The turning point came almost a year after Rachel, First step back onto Arroyo Flats. A federal environmental crimes task force, prodded by growing public outrage, secured a warrant to inspect current Sonoran facilities in the region. They found newer dumping sites that bore an uncanny resemblance to the old ones in Granddad's maps, and one internal email chain where a mid-level manager had, disastrously for his bosses, drawn a direct comparison between our grandparents' methods and what we're doing now, just more discreet. When that email surfaced in court, even Sonoran's most polished spokespeople couldn't spin it into something pretty. Their stock dipped, their board grumbled, and Cole Harlow, once so composed, began to look, in news footage, like a man whose suit didn't fit quite as well anymore. Faced with the prospect of protracted, ugly trials, and the possibility of criminal charges for some executives, Sonoran came back to the table. But this time it wasn't with a private NDA-laden offer. It was with Elena across from them, a coalition of affected families beside her, and several journalists observing from the back of the room. The eventual settlement wasn't a fairy tale. No amount of money could undo what had been done in the 1940s or in the years since. But the terms, hammered out over weeks of tense negotiation, included a public admission of wrongdoing by Sonoran and its predecessor entities in regards to forced labor and illegal dumping at Arroyo Flats and related sites, the establishment of a sizable fund, overseen by an independent board including community representatives, to pay for medical care, scholarships, and community projects in affected towns, a legally binding commitment to full cleanup of the identified waste sites, under third-party and government supervision, with regular public reporting, the designation of the Arroyo Flats bunker and surrounding land as a protected historical site, co-managed by a local board and a national museum, specializing in environmental and labor history. When the judge asked Rachel, as primary landowner, whether she agreed to transfer part of her property into the trust that would manage the memorial and site, she hesitated for only a second. "This land hurt a lot of people before it ever helped me," she said. "If turning it into a place that tells the truth can stop that from happening again, then yeah, I agree. And you, Ms. Monroe," the judge said, "will retain a portion of the parcel for your own use, per the negotiated terms." Those terms included a modest but solid financial settlement for Rachel and her kids. Not hush money, but compensation explicitly tied to the unauthorized use and contamination of their land. Enough to buy a small house in town, to secure Liam's ongoing medical care, to give Haley a college fund that didn't begin and end with wishful thinking. Cole signed the papers with a tight jaw, the cameras catching the moment. His statement to the press afterward was a study in corporate damage control. Rachel didn't watch it. She was outside on the courthouse steps, holding Liam's hand while Haley snapped a photo of the three of them, with Maya, Lena, and Elena. "Okay, everybody stop squinting like they've never seen the sun," Haley complained. "We're making history here, or at least a decent Instagram post." "You're still not tagging locations," Elena warned. "I don't want you dealing with weird trolls in my comments." Rachel laughed, the sound feeling unfamiliar and light. For the first time in what felt like forever, the air around her didn't taste like panic. Months later, standing again at the mouth of the bunker, now secured with a new gate and an interpretive plaque instead of a rusted padlock, Rachel watched a group of college students file past, headphones on, listening to an audio guide about Project Dry Current and the people of Arroyo Flats. One of the panels bore Granddad's picture, younger than she remembered him, in his work shirt and cap. Next to it, under key whistleblowers, was a quote from his notebook: "Silence protects the ones who don't need it and kills the ones who do." Another panel bore the names from the rosters, etched into metal. Families had come from all over to run their fingers over those names, to leave flowers and photos and little folded notes. Liam, now 5 and fascinated by everything mechanical, tugged on Rachel's sleeve. "Mom, look," he said. "They put Granddad's toolbox in a glass box. Like a superhero thing." "That's because he kind of was," Rachel said. "And you too," Haley added, leaning on the rail beside them. "You're like supermom of environmental justice now. I told you your autograph would be worth something." Rachel snorted. If you start selling my signature on eBay, I'm cutting off your data plan." They fell quiet for a moment, listening to the murmur of the tour guide down the tunnel, explaining how ordinary workers have been turned into cogs in a secret war machine, and how, decades later, their descendants refuse to let that story stay buried. "Do you ever wish we'd just taken the first check?" Haley asked. "Not accusing, just curious. Some nights when Liam's cough keeps me up and the bills pile higher than I like," Rachel admitted. "But then I think about Mrs. Beckett, about Maya's family, about all the kids who'll grow up knowing what really happened here. And I think, if we'd cashed out, I'd have to live the rest of my life pretending I didn't know." She looked out over the scrub, now dotted with remediation equipment, and in the distance, the early outlines of a small memorial garden. "The money would have been easy," she said. "Living with that kind of lie, that would have been hard." Haley nodded slowly. "Guess we picked a hard thing on purpose, for once. Sometimes the hard thing's the only one that changes anything," Rachel said. She felt her phone buzz in her pocket. A notification from the Stories Untold channel on her YouTube app, ironically one of Haley's favorite pastimes, informed her that a new video had gone live, "From Bunker to Breakthrough: The True Story of Arroyo Flats." "I can't believe they made a whole episode about us," Haley said, peering over her shoulder. "You're like internet famous." "Let's hope it's the kind of famous that helps," Rachel said. In the end, Rachel didn't just inherit a piece of land or a concrete bunker sealed since 1947. She inherited a choice: take the money and let the past stay buried, or risk everything to bring the truth into the light. She chose the truth. How many more secrets like this are still sleeping under our feet, waiting for someone brave or desperate enough to dig them up? If you want to hear more real-life stories like Rachel's, where ordinary people drag buried history into the daylight, make sure you subscribe to Stories Untold. Turn on the bell so you never miss a new episode. And share this story with someone who still believes the past can't hurt us. Because as Arroyo Flats proved, the past isn't gone. It's just waiting to be found.